Our boys are expected, that's that collective socialization again, that man box. See, within the man box, right, we're taught as men, and we pass this teaching down to our boys. It's in the fabric of our society, in a male-dominated society, that women and girls are less valuable than men and boys, that on some level, women are the property of men, and then also that women and girls are sexual objects, and that we teach our boys that if you have an interest in a girl, that interest better be about sexual conquest, right? That if you're just a friend with a girl and you're 14 years old, then dad's scratching his head like, why my son just hanging out with this girl and it's just a friend? Why isn't he trying to get with her? Why isn't he interested with her? Because that man box, right? The glue that keeps that man box together is homophobia.
Hey guys, welcome to the Rebirth Podcast. I want to thank you guys for watching and for listening. In this podcast, we talk to individuals that have had to reinvent, recreate, and reimagine in order to grow. But before you watch and listen, I want to remind you to subscribe, to like, to review, and to share this episode and this podcast with everyone that you know. Thank you so much and enjoy. So Anna Marie and Ted, thank you guys for joining the Rebirth Podcast. What's up?
Hey, JR.
Hey, it's so great to be with you.
It's so good to see both of your faces, right? And I could have easily had one of you on, but you know, like just the both of you together is what makes this whole thing incredible, right? Not only from this book that you guys have co-authored together, but to the work that you do every single day with the Call to Men. So I'd like to turn it over to, let's start with Anna Marie. Anna Marie, tell us a little bit about, your history, your work, and what led you to not only to a Call to Men, but also to then say, hey, Ted, let's write a book.
Sure. So I have kind of a crazy story and it goes way back. And it really is the moment that I feel like, my bond with Ted was kind of solidified. And this is when I had just had my son, Jack. He was 3 months old. He's now 12. So this is forever ago. This is, 12 years ago.
But it went by so fast.
Oh my gosh, in a flash. And we could talk about that on the next podcast. But Ted and I were in a gymnasium in New Orleans. We were in a high school gymnasium, and he was on stage speaking to 300 plus high school boys. And he was going through his talk about the man box and how boys are socialized to view their own manhood in this limited way. And he was sharing stories about, himself as a father and also as a son and his experience with his own masculinity. And I was watching those boys in that auditorium, and some of them were crying and some of them, were like squirming in their seat. They were visibly uncomfortable. You could tell they were trying to push it down. Some of them were laughing, just trying to push away whatever was coming up for them. Mm-hmm. But JR, let me tell you, all of them were reacting, and I was too. I was watching him do his thing. And with that baby boy at home, I thought, I've got to hang on to this. Like, I have so much to learn as a mother. And I want my son to be all he was created to be. I want him to be his full authentic self. And whether that means he loves basketball and golf, he can also love theater and art. Mm-hmm. I want to celebrate all of him and not just the things that society deem are important to his boyhood and ultimately his manhood. And in that moment for me, I was actually working as a consultant outside the organization, but I decided I was going to hang on to the mission of a Call to Men. And I have been blessed to have spent the last 10 years really working to further that mission in one way or another. First as a consultant, then going on the board, and then coming on staff and being able to write this incredible book with Ted. So that's what brought me to this place.
Wow, that's incredible. And Anna Marie, before I turn it over to you, Ted, Anna Marie, like prior to that interaction that you had, obviously you were doing consulting work for the organization. So you were well aware of the mission. You had heard, lectures done by either Ted, Tony, or any other staff members and leaders that you guys have within the organization. But prior to a Call to Men, you as a woman, had you ever come in contact with this type of work?
No, I really hadn't. And I'd never really thought, I had thought a lot about my own experience and how I was socialized as a woman in the South, how I was taught to be quiet, to stay small, to make other people feel comfortable all the time. So I'd done a lot of thinking about my own experience, but I had not thought about not even about my husband's experience. Like I just hadn't put a lot of thought into it. So it really wasn't until I heard the message of a call to men articulated in that way that I thought about my dad differently, my brother differently, my husband differently. It was totally eye-opening.
It's so interesting you say that because it's that gate to be able to open up this incredible opportunity for us to have dialogue and have relatability, and then ultimately develop community, and then within that community you find support and encouragement. But that is something that I talk about even in the veteran space, right? There's a lot of family members that are like, I don't understand, the veteran in my family and my home anymore after their experiences. And I always encourage them, like, hey, it's important for you equally as well to go and put yourself in those spaces to understand maybe there's another veteran outside of your home that is talking about their experience openly. Listen to them, talk to them, because that'll give you a better understanding of potentially the person in your family, in your home, and how to have that conversation with them and kind of where it goes from there. Now, Ted, turn it over to you. So tell us a little bit about your history. I know you and Tony Porter, go way back, and you have your own history as well before you even started Call to Men, and then you guys decided to come together and make this thing a movement.
Thank you, JR. Yeah. So Tony and I founded the organization in 2002. So it's almost 20 years that we've actually been working in this not-for-profit. He and I volunteered for the first 8 years of the organization's life, while we also had full-time jobs. We supported the organization financially and with our time. And then we were able to leave our jobs and just focus on the work of A Call to Men. And we worked together, though, probably 5 years before that. So we've been working together for 25 years. And we both worked in the area of domestic violence, working with batterers, actually, men who were domestic violence offenders. I ran the largest domestic violence program in the United States in New York City, 600 men a week, 20 classes in English, 10 classes in Spanish, and it wasn't doing a thing to end domestic violence in New York City, right? Wow. And so, because the reason why men are abusive really has to do with not about anger management, not about mental illness, not about alcohol or substance abuse. Even though you may see alcohol and substance abuse, you may see mental illness. That's not the reason. The reason is about the belief system that men have, how we're taught to be men. And so Tony and I, he was also doing work, and we both come from anti-racism work as well, him more so than me. So we have a real awareness about intersectionality as well. So to make a long story short, we came together, and Tony was the original visionary for A Call to Men. And he came to me and said, hey, we need to stop focusing on the men who are doing these things that we don't want them to do, because that's the minority of men. When we look at violence and discrimination against women, most of that is done by men, like violence against women, sexual assault, domestic violence, sexual harassment in the workplace. Most of that is done by men. The overwhelming majority is done by men, but the overwhelming majority of men don't do those things, but we're silent about those that do. Right. So let's speak to the silence, because it's not about the individual man doing the thing that we don't want him to do. It's about the culture that allows that man to think he can, right? Mm-hmm. Whether we're looking at gender-based behavior that's sexist and male-dominant, or whether we're looking at racist behavior that's based on culture or race, right? That it's not about calling people out, the individual out, while that's important for accountability, but it's about calling people in. And we also have this lens that it's not about indicting men for being men, but inviting men to the conversation. And the book that Anna Marie and I wrote focuses on all of that as we bring boys into this new way of reimagining boyhood and therefore redefining manhood.
Ted, for somebody who has been doing this work for as long as you have, and then obviously with Tony Porter and A Call to Men, talk about what you feel when you travel and you have conversations with people from all over the country, all over the world. Obviously A Call to Men does work with professional athletes as well, the military, corporate America, I mean, non-profit, everybody, right? Mm-hmm. Do you feel that there is a different energy related to this topic? Do you feel like people are more inviting to this than they were initially when you started doing this work?
Yes. And just as you said, JR, the work of A Call to Men, our vision is to create a world where all men and boys are loving and respectful, and all women, girls, and those in the margins of the margins are valued and safe. When we say the margins of the margins, we're speaking about those people who are forgotten, like Black trans women, like, right? So everyone. But it's really focused on men and boys, and wherever there's men and boys is where we want to be. So we worked with, as you said, professional sports leagues, all of them, NFL, National Hockey League, baseball, NBA, Major League Soccer, from grassroots organizations, military and law enforcement, as you mentioned, high schools, colleges, middle schools, and now even younger with the Book of Dares that Anna Marie and I wrote. So what I found is that while we've been doing this work for 20 years, in the beginning, 20 years ago, men doing work in this space was often questioned. You know, you'd have a meme of somebody looking side-eyed at you now. We didn't have those then, but we got a lot of that.
I think of that meme. There's a meme where there's two dogs and they're sitting next to each other, and one dog is showing his teeth, and you can tell he's aggressive. And the dog next to him has this look, and he's just kind of leaning away from him with big eyes. And it's like, what's he talking about? What's he going to do right now, right? And that's when you said that. That's what my mind goes to. I think of that meme, but you're right, because this isn't something that is incredibly popular. Now, let's talk about the Book of Dares. Anna Marie, like, you know, Ted just said, hey, listen, yes, we've worked with all these individuals that are adults, right? Or young adults. But you guys with this book wanted to go even younger. You wanted to reach a different demographic. Why is that?
Well, we want to take everything we've learned working with men and boys over the past 20 years, everything that's been validated by research, everything that, you know, where we see transformation happening, and we want to get it to boys sooner. And what we're hearing from parents is that they are hungry for this content. Parents are sitting around the dinner table reading a dare a night. They're having rich conversations with their kids. And not only that, JR, but after the kids go off to do their homework, moms and dads, partners, parents are staying at the table, and dads are talking about, fathers, men are talking about their experience with manhood and masculinity in a way that they never have before, because they've never been given the space to think about these issues in that way. And I've heard that from the minute I partnered up with A Call to Men, that Tony and Ted and all of our trainers have told me, what you will see is that this is new, that this is that they've never been given the space, that we've never taken time to have these conversations. And so they're like, oh my gosh, this is my experience. Let's talk more. Let's get into this more. So there's a hunger for this content starting young and going all the way up. Now, what we've done with the Book of Dares, it's 100 ways for boys to be kind, bold, and brave. And all of the dares in the book, JR, ladder up to promote healthy masculinity, healthy manhood, authenticity, and gender equity and inclusion. So the dares may seem, they are fun, they're attractive to boys, but they're doing some heavy lifting behind the scenes. They're helping boys think about healthy relationships. They're helping boys develop emotional literacy. They are promoting social emotional learning. And that emotional literacy piece is really important. So for your listeners, that might sound like some buzzword or whatever, but all it really means is being able to articulate how you're feeling in the moment, right? That's emotional literacy. And I know for boys, and having, I have a 12-year-old son, that when I go to Jack and I say, Jack, how are you? What's he going to say? 9 times out of 10, he goes,
Fine.
I'm good. Because that's what boys are,
and you had the shoulder in there too, so that's exactly right. I'm good. Just throw the shoulder out too.
Thank you.
You can tell you've seen that multiple times.
I have seen it multiple times. So we have to push forward with our boys and help them go past that. I'm good. Well, why are you good? Well, what went on today? And it's about having those conversations. I feel like a lot of times as parents, and I'm speaking for myself in my experience, that when Jack comes to me with a problem, big, small, anywhere in between, my inclination is to help him get to the solution, right? So, I'm solving problems all day long. And so that's my inclination, is to help him solve a problem. But I've been very intentional to step out of that and to say, okay, well, how did that make you feel? And that allows him to be like, well, it made me feel sad, or it made me feel frustrated, or it made me feel alone, or it made me feel joyful. We're not just talking about negative emotions. We want boys to be able to articulate a wide range of emotions, all the happy ones too, so that they can sit in those. But being able to take that step back and allow him to process what's really going on. We'll get to the solution, right? We'll get to that.
Right.
But being able to sit in that emotion has really helped. It really does help develop their emotional literacy.
Yeah, that's one of the things that as I read through the book, and because I did read the book, and I started to think to myself, and I believe this is probably one of the misconceptions that you guys probably want to debunk, because this is where my mind went, and I don't know if this is just me thinking that, is I just kind of assumed this is a good book for parents that have boys to read. And then as I started reading the book, I thought to myself, wait a minute, I don't have a son. I have a daughter. She's 8 years old. Wait, this is probably a really good book for my daughter to read. So then she can understand what are some of the challenges that boys, are experiencing, and what society tells boys that they're supposed to act and feel and speak and do. And so, I mean, is that accurate? Like, Anna Marie, is that something that you feel like it also equally is important for girls to read, just so they can have an understanding?
Absolutely. We are hearing from families that children of all genders are relating to the book and finding it very powerful. And in fact, we were in a conversation night before last, with a woman who had organized a school event, and she's the mom of 3 girls. She got in the book. She was like, I don't know why this says for boys, because I want my girls to read it. They are reading it. And she said, and I need to be doing everything in here too.
Right.
So
Right.
we're
Well,
finding that it's really relatable.
Well, when you talk about that emotional literacy component, right, with Ted, I mean, that's one of the, in one of our early conversations, my early conversations with Ted, obviously I had Tony Porter on the podcast, but then when Ted and I, because I was like, how can I help? I want to stay involved. I want to be a part of this movement. Similar to you, Anna Marie, you're like, oh, I want to hold on to this. And I was like, I want to hold on to this as well. And then Ted, we got on the phone, and I was, it was almost like a therapy session. I'm sure Ted was like, man, I'm just trying to figure out how we can like work together and get the mission of A Call to Men out there, right? Like, and I just literally was dumping all of this stuff onto Ted's lap, and it's like, hey, this is what my experience has been like. This is what I endured as a young boy. This is what I never did until after I was out of the military and was injured and already had a lot of stuff piled up. And it wasn't until my best friend encouraging me at the age of 24 years old, 24 years old, to cry. And I was like, what do you mean cry? Like, I don't need to cry. I don't have nothing to cry about. And he's like, no, you got to cry. And as I read this book, and some of the dares in there, a lot of it was about that. How do you feel? What do you feel? It's about that element of being vulnerable. And I understand that now at this stage in my life. But Ted, I mean, how difficult is that as Anna Marie said, it's not just boys, it's for people in general to be able to, just all genders, everybody, all age groups, to be able to get to that point of saying, I got to be vulnerable, because within that vulnerability, you find community.
Yeah, that's wonderful way of stating that, JR. And I so appreciated our conversations, because when men get together and go deep and are vulnerable with each other, so much opens up for us. And it's such a place of strength. We've been taught that vulnerability is a place of weakness, but it's a place of strength. That's one of the unfortunate misconceptions about manhood, that you're not supposed to be vulnerable. And when we talk about this book, it's really based on the work of A Call to Men over the last 20 years that's focused on the collective socialization of men, male socialization. We've coined the term, as you know, called the man box, right? Be tough, be in charge, don't express any emotion except for anger, don't ask for help, be dominant, not only over women and girls, but over men and boys too, right? That we're supposed to be aggressive, be the protector, be the provider. Now, there's some wonderful things in there, right? I want to be a protector and a provider for my family, right? But if I protect in a way that limits freedoms of others, then is that protection or is that control, right? And I want to be a provider, but don't women protect and provide also, right? That's not just something that men do. So this man box that we kind of deconstruct, and that's what the book does. Boys are mimicking what they learn from men. And so there's a lot of wonderful things that they're learning, but there's things that are harmful. For instance, when we look at the issues that men face, anxiety, depression out the roof, living 6 years less than women nationally, suicide 3.5 times higher than women. That's because of this, again, these rigid notions of manhood that say, don't ask for help, don't cry, because we tell that little boy to stop crying at 3, 4 years old, and we're telling him to stop feeling. So then he stuffs those feelings, right? We tell him to man up, suck it up. I don't want to hear all that. I'll give you something to cry about, right? Whenever I hear that, I still sweat at the time. I'm bald-headed. People can't see that, but I still get a puff of sweat that just comes up when I hear somebody say, "I'll give you something to cry about." So that's what we tell our boys. So they, as Anne Marie mentioned earlier, they don't develop emotional language or literacy, and therefore don't even understand how to solve the problem because they don't know what they're experiencing. So they are taught to move on from the problem by stuff it, shove it down, suck it up, just move on from it. And then we don't grow emotionally. And later on in life, develop all these issues, depression. Those people who do things that are harmful, when we look at our youth, male youth are at a much higher rate of suicide than female youth as well. And then when you look at the LGBTQ, transgender, nonconforming youth, it's even higher because this man box punishes them and humiliates them and demeans them in a whole nother way. So with this message, the book is for everyone. And we found that it's really helpful for everyone because there's about, as Anna Marie mentioned, all of these dares, there's 100 of them, and they ladder up to 3 buckets. Healthy masculinity, or healthy manhood, but then the other 2 are around authenticity, gender equity, and inclusion. So everybody can benefit from that. And you're right, even those that are written directly for the experience of boys, if girls read that, they'll get a more insight into what boys are experiencing and what they're taught. So we want to deconstruct this. We want to interrupt it. We want to keep all the wonderful things there are about being male and being a boy, because there's so many, you couldn't even name them. But we also want our boys to reimagine what it would be for me to be my full authentic self, right? That I don't have to just play football. You know what? They're dancing over there. That looks really fun. I wonder if I can do that. I have a number of children, and 2 of them I'm thinking about. My oldest son, who's a basketball player, he played high school ball competitively and then went on to play for NYU. And then I have his younger brother, who's a dancer, right? And so during COVID, well, we're still there, but when we were sheltering in place more and the kids were home, they're all away now at school and in their apartment. Jalen, the youngest, the dancer, who's also gay, came out of gay at 15. He's now 18. He's now 19. He just turned 19. He was putting them through dance class, right? The family through dance class. Josh couldn't hang with Jalen.
But he's an athlete. He is an athlete.
Yeah, he couldn't hang. He couldn't hang. He was winded. He's bending over. I said, now, do you think your basketball team could hang with Jalen's routine? He's like, no way, no way. Right? So it's really about this box we frame these things. And so what's wrong with that? Right? There's nothing wrong with our kids exploring and being all of who they are.
Yeah. Well, I know about that dancing and athlete. Come to mind. No, go ahead, Anna Marie.
I was just going to say there's a couple, as Ted was talking, I was thinking about dare to try a sport or activity that's outside your comfort zone. Dare to do something you love, even if it's not what boys are supposed to do. Like those immediately come to mind and really support, what Ted's talking about.
Yeah, well, I connected not only with that dare because that stood out to me, but I also connected with what you just said, Ted, as far as like the example you gave with your children. And I know that firsthand because being somebody that was on Dancing with the Stars, and there have been athletes. I mean, there was an athlete that was on my season, and he went home week 1. Like he was gone. Like, but you know what? He's an NBA champion. He's a legend. He's made a lot more money than me. But I have the Mirrorball trophy in my house. He does not. So as much as I look at him and say, man, it would be cool to be a professional athlete and to have done the things that you've been able to do, at the end of the day, I also have another skill set that he doesn't have. And that's what makes us incredibly special, right? That's what makes this whole thing, meaning this whole world and human race element, where it could be more embracive and inviting and more loving, but because we all have our own special uniqueness that we bring to the table, and I think that is something that for me as a young man, I when you talked about Ted, there's a lot of boys that, they're oppressing and they're just burying their feelings. And I think about, how much of my life, and I've had to do a lot of diving into this over the last year and a half, 2 years, because not only my connection with you guys, but also, just kind of other people that I've encountered. And I have found myself now becoming a little bit more open and just really vulnerable in other areas of my life. I'm a very vulnerable person. I'm very comfortable with telling you how I feel. And today was not a great day for me. I've cried on television. Like, I have no problem I might cry right now in a second, like for no reason. Like, I don't even know why. And I'm okay with that. But there still is another section of my life that I have protected, that I have remained closed and close to chest, right? Because the culture has taught me, you don't do that. You don't go against that. You don't open those doors. You don't tell everybody about what's happening in this house or what your experience has been. And because I was taught that, and it's related to my mother, and whether she intentionally, implemented that, or it was an element of her own challenges that she, was going through in life that she never dealt with, but she was just essentially kind of projecting her fears onto me. What I learned as I got out of the military is everything that I was lashing out at people, and how short I was with people, and how upset I became with people, and to the point where it still even bled into my relationship with my wife, where it was always like, I'm not going to be completely vulnerable with you because you can leave me, because you like that's the way it is. Like, my mother and I don't have the best relationship. My own mother was able to kind of distance herself from me. So of course anybody else is going to do that, right? And it wasn't until I became an adult that I started to realize that no, my injury in Iraq was not the source of all of this just bitterness that was just boiling up inside of me. It was literally related to everything that I had experienced as a young boy and what I felt that I was trying to live up to. And so the minute that we can start getting into these, homes, and to these kids, these boys, these girls, and start to say, hey, no, listen, you need to learn how to be able to talk about things. You need to be able to find the space where you can talk about those things. Anna Marie, I'm curious about, when you gave the example with your son and how he's like, I'm good. I'm good. You did the shoulder thing, right? But how do parents continue to engage in that conversation? Because it's so easy. I mean, my daughter's 8 and we can ask her a question, how's school? She's like, it was good. And it was like, okay, what was good about it, right? Like, what? And then you, as a parent and as an adult, you're like, listen, I'm busy. I got stuff to do. I don't have time to sit here and ask you 50 questions just to get maybe 2 or 3 answers. But we should be spending that time, and we should be carving out that time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I want to just back up and say I appreciate all you shared. And we do really have to think about how trauma impacts our children and how they carry that through the world. And especially for men, as Ted said, we tell our boys to keep it moving, right? That it's done, it's over, keep it moving. So we have to learn how to deal with those things better. So I just want to say I appreciate that. And then, yes, we do need to dig in with our kids. And some of the really practical things that have really helped me are talking in the car. Jack's not going to drive for another couple of years. Talking in the car, making the most of that time, I find really helpful. Now, this is more so pre-COVID, when we're running from school to activity, when a lot of our life as parents, as Uber drivers,
no tips.
Right? No. Having even tough conversations in the car when nobody has to look at each other, when there's an out, when there's a quick out, when there's not so much pressure built up around that conversation. Talking in the car has always helped me. I also love, and this might not be the thing for you to do with your child, but for Jack and myself, pre-COVID, we were going to dinner once a week, just the two of us. And I would find that if I let him pick the spot, and if he got to order whatever, the French fries or the onion rings or whatever it was he wanted, and I wasn't telling him to eat broccoli, that he told me a lot more stuff.
You gave him a little bit of responsibility and an ability to make the decisions, that he kind of felt like he was a part of this. It wasn't just him being told to go somewhere and do something. So, exactly. I don't want to be a part of this.
And it's just part of our routine, and it's where we can catch up and where he can get a Sprite, and it becomes a special time. And so I've noticed over the years that a lot of information comes out that I wouldn't normally get at dinner, in the car, and also at bedtime. And this is the biggest challenge for me because I'm so dang tired at the end of the day. Like, I'll just be honest. Bedtime has never been Anna Marie's time to shine. I'm up in the morning, cheerful, making breakfast. Like, that's really more my place. So I figured out Chad, my husband, and we did this switch really early on. Like, he committed to do bedtime, and he's down to listen to all the chit chat at the end of the day, because a lot comes out when Jack gets quiet, when the world gets quiet and it's time to go to bed. I know if he calls one of us up after bedtime, after he's been, put to bed or whatever, it looks a little different now that he's 12. We're not reading stories and tucking in the same way, but we do still go up and like tell him good night and hug and kiss and all that good stuff. So when we get called up for a second round of bedtime, that something's coming out. So rather than just yelling up, go to bed, like you want to, like at the end of the day, indulge those moments a little longer than you might want to.
I feel like you're speaking to me. Yeah, go ahead, Ted. Go ahead.
Yeah, JR, I'm just, because of something you said, JR, and also what Anna Marie just said. First of all, I want to just support and affirm what you modeled, JR. The vulnerability you modeled, the language that you're able to put to your experience, how you're able to share your experience, because that's what mental health is about. And that's where we want our boys to get to. And that's where the Book of Dares opens up the conversations, those conversations that you were asking Anna Marie about. Like, the Book of Dares are entry points. Every dare, there's 100 of them, are entry points for where you can have conversations around how dare to name 3 emotions you experienced today. Dare to share something you're afraid of. Dare to ask for help. Dare to prove a stereotype wrong. Dare to be a leader. They're all over the place as far as the dares. Dare to encourage someone's uniqueness. I'm just going to each page here, and every time you open the book, it's right there. You don't have to read the book from book cover to cover, but it's all right there. And that's what the book does. It really is our entry points, and it prevents all those things that you're talking about, where they don't have to be 24 or older when they start identifying what's really going on with me, that they're able to articulate that and go through that process all along, therefore healthier men. And I'm so glad that you've gotten to the point that you've gotten to, and you're blessing so many people with your story and your experience, including us. Thank you.
Man, thank you. That's why I love you guys, just because but that's what you guys just did, what people that are watching or people that are listening just witnessed, what the both of you did when I shared something, and I just kind of shared something, and it kind of like, it was almost like a throwaway, where like I was like, yeah, I'm going to share it, but I'm using this to get to my point. But the both of you are actively listening, and to the point where the both of you said, hold on, before we get to the question and answer, we're going to acknowledge what you just did, and we're going to support you. And that by itself, that right there is everything, because that could be so empowering to somebody that, oh yeah, I just kind of had this experience or whatever, and they just kind of throw it away and they move on to another conversation. And for somebody who's in the same space with them, say, hold on, I want to acknowledge what you just said, and I just want to applaud you for doing that. So I thank both of you for, doing that for me. I mean, obviously this isn't about me, but I appreciate you guys giving me that gift.
But JR, thank you for that. And men don't get that. And our boys don't get that. What they get is, he scored a touchdown. He landed the job. They get it it's all performance based.
Mm-hmm.
That's what manhood, in this construct that we have, it's performance based. So you always have to achieve. That's a lot. That's why we live in 6 years less than women, man. That's a lot of stress. And in addition to that, we're not supposed to ask for help. So we don't go in to get the checkups. We wait till the leg falls off before we pick it up and bring it to the doctor, right?
I remember one of my early conversations with Tony. I was picking his brain about something, and it was literally me just picking his brain as someone who is an expert, has been doing a lot of work in this space. And at the end of the conversation, he said, "Hey man, let me know if you want me to call somebody. I got these." And I said, no, I wasn't calling for that. I wasn't calling for that. I was just calling just to pick your brain. I wasn't calling. And he's like, see, that's the problem. He said, that's the problem. And of course, in the next 15 minutes of this phone conversation, when it could have ended, if I would have been like, oh, I appreciate that, but I wasn't there yet. And I think still to a degree, I'm still not there. But he said that's the problem, is that men aren't comfortable sitting here asking another man for help. That this perception that they can't do it all by themselves. And he's like, I'm here to help, man. Just tell me when. And I was like, okay, I hear you. I got you. All right. You're right. I had this experience when I lived in New York. I was going into the city and I was going into the subway and I wasn't in a hurry. I was early, so I had plenty of time. And I remember I was going down the steps and this guy, you can hear the train coming, but I was like, I'm not in the rush. I'm just going to wait for the next train. Like, I'm not rushing. But this guy behind me comes down the stairs charging, and he like elbows me as he runs by me. He's rushing to get on the train. So, of course, I just kind of move over to the side a little bit. I'm like, oh, this dude like just elbowed me, right? So, we get to the platform, the train, he misses the train. So he's standing right there on the platform. So I come through and I said to him, and this is JR that he has to work on a little bit. But I said to him, I said, if you would have just knocked me down, you probably would have been able to keep that momentum and you would have made it. But because you just elbowed me, like that slowed you down a little bit, right? Now, from a physics standpoint, I don't think that's true. But, I had to make a point. And that was my entry point. And so he looks at me and he says, I was probably 34 at the time. And, I say young man, but he's probably like in late 20s. And he has a backpack on. What I did not notice at that moment is he had boxing gloves on the side of his backpack. I did not notice. And young black man. And so he says to me, he's like, what'd you say to me? And I said, I repeated it. And he says, man, get out of my face. That's what he said. And I was like, hey, listen, man, like you asked me what I said. And so I told you. And he's like, man, just go over there. Just walk over there, right? Get out of my face. That's what he says to me. And as I'm walking away, I said, listen, man, I just because you're having a bad day doesn't mean it has to become everybody else's bad day. Mm-hmm. I get on the train. We go one stop. I see him in the car behind me, right? We go to the next stop. He gets off. I still had a few more stops to go. He gets off. He walks into my car where I'm sitting. And so my experience is like, oh, JR, I'm sitting down. No, JR, stand up. At that point is when I noticed the boxing glove. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to do nothing because this dude, even if he's an amateur fighter, I'm not going to get caught sitting down. So I stand up and he comes up to me and he says, I told myself that if you were still on the train at the next stop, I was going to come in here and apologize. And I was like, and it just threw me for a loop. And I was like, well, apologize for what? And he says, no, you're right. I thought about what you said. I thought about that, I'm having a bad day, man. And you're right. I am taking out on other people and I should check myself and whatever. He goes into this whole description. And at the end, we shook hands. And I was like, yo, man, respect. I respect you for doing that. And I thought about that whole experience and that encounter. And still, it's been years since I had that encounter, but I still think about it till today. And I just think about how hard it is. And for people, let's just say people, to get to that point, to be able to receive some information that might not be the most pleasant information about ourselves, and to be able to sit and listen and acknowledge and then actually counter by saying, I'm sorry, my bad. And then for me, what I've had to work on is that when someone apologizes to me, and this is all credit to my wife here, because people apologize to me and I'm like, all right, cool. Like, but hey, you should have, we shouldn't have gotten to this point, right? Like this shouldn't have happened. Right? I get to that place. And my wife is like, you know how hard it is for people to apologize? When people finally apologize to you, just receive it. Just receive it and then move forward. Don't sit here and kind of like poo-poo their apology like it means nothing to you. And so in that moment with him, I was able to receive that energy that he was sharing with me and then just say, hey, man, blessings to you and whatever life brings your way, right? And we walked away from this incredible experience. And the reason why it sits with me, because I think about how many, specifically boys, when someone says something to you and kind of sizes you up like that, right? When someone calls you out to some degree, our natural instinct is to be like, I got to fight you. I have to fight you. I have to defend myself. I have to prove to you that I am more than what you're saying I am. And it's so misguided. We're misled, and it's unfortunate because the ones that are suffering are those boys, right? Yeah. Are those kids that feel that end up getting themselves hurt or whatever the case may be. And So, for me, the book is one of those things that I think about. It's going to change a lot of lives. And I think hopefully plant seeds in a lot of these homes. And as you said, Anna Marie, for even parents to start to kind of have those conversations with themselves and understand what is it that we're not doing or what is it that we could be doing differently. And so now I didn't grow up. My mother had the attitude of a parent does not apologize to their children. Because once you do that, you relinquish control and power. Then your kids run over you. And I remember as a kid, like there would be times where she was just wrong. And I'm like, you're wrong. And she's like, nope, not, she would never apologize. Well, now me as an adult, it was hard for me to apologize. Even with my relationship with my wife, she's quick to apologize. I'm quick to just find another way to kind of show her that I'm sorry and I know I did something or said something. But the words, I'm sorry, it's still hard for me today. But because I was taught that, right? It was because I was taught that pattern and that behavior. So, to continue to encourage these boys to break that cycle and to get to that place where they can just be open and vulnerable and trust this whole process, I mean, it's everything. Now, why did you guys decide on 100? Like, was one of you like on, well, 90's good enough? And then Anna Marie's like, no, it has to be 100. And then you're like, but that's like 10 more. Like, we got 90 good ones. How did you, because I know how hard it is to write a book. And so when you're trying to figure out what goes into it, and then you got other voices like editors and publishers and everybody else a part of this, how did you guys pick 100? What supported that?
Well, the 100 was more just marketing. But the dares, I'll be honest with you, right? Like we have more. We could do it. We could do another book.
Yeah.
But the dares, focusing on dares is probably the more important part of the conversation, is that we talk to boys, 1,000 boys all across the country, and we heard back from them, JR, that they were equally frightened and fascinated with dares. There's so much wrapped up in I dare you, potential for shame, embarrassment. They have to prove themselves. So we took elements of that man box culture, right, and turned it on its head and turned them into 100 positive challenges. And when we talked to boys, things they told us were, they wanted to be able to do these things with their friends. So we know out there that boys that they're asking their parents after they've gotten the book, hey, can we get a book for my buddy Jack? Because I want to be able to do this with him. So there's the reason we focused on dares was very intentional. The 100 was because we had 100 good ideas, We just put them out there.
Well, JR, you're in Texas, and
everything
big in Texas, right?
That's right.
And Anna Marie's in
That's
Texas
right.
Too, so.
That's right. So how challenging is it for our youth? Because, when you kind of step outside of your home, as kids now, they step outside of their home, or even within their home, they have devices in their hand, they have devices in front of their face, right? And pop cultures, for the most part, is going in many ways against the work of what A Call to Men is about, right? Like, I mean, when you think of music and some of the lyrics and some of the ways that they go about promoting their music and how, degrading it is to women at times, depending on the song and the artist or whatever. But how hard is it for young boys specifically to not want to look at that girl that you really like and think, oh, because it's so cool and because everyone's talking about this, I have to like kiss her and I have to make a physical move on her instead of just, no, it could just be a friendship and it later can evolve into something else. Isn't that so? I mean, that's a challenge for our youth today that I believe that I didn't experience growing up because there wasn't as much of the content easily accessible.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to jump in here for that one. So all those things you just said, JR, brought up a number of dares that are in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Dare to think about how women are treated in video games. Dare to, I'm not sure about the lyrics.
It's dare to evaluate, dare to look at a song's lyrics, or dare to really read through a song's lyrics.
Right, dare to look at a song's lyrics. Don't get caught up in the beat, but now let's look at the lyrics, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a number of other dares that fit right into that. And when we talk about dare to have a girl just as a friend,
Mm,
because to your point is that our boys are expected. That's that collective socialization again. That man box. See, within the man box, right? We're taught as men, and we pass this teaching down to our boys. It's in the fabric of our society, in a male-dominated society, that women and girls are less valuable than men and boys, that on some level women are the property of men, and then
mm,
also that women and girls are sexual objects, and that we teach our boys that if you have an interest in a girl, that interest better be about sexual conquest, right? That if you're just a friend with a girl and you're 14 years old, then dad scratching his head like, why my son just hanging out with this girl and it's just a friend? Why isn't he trying to get with her? Why isn't he interested with
right.
her? Because that man box, right? The glue that keeps that man box together is homophobia,
Mm,
right? If you're interested in a girl is not sexual, then there's something wrong with you based on this construct. So we teach our boys to sexually objectify women and girls. I just want to give your audience just a quick example of that. You have a
yeah.
high school boy in your community. His name's John, and he's going to take Keisha out to a movie on Friday night. This is before COVID when they could go to the movies, right? So John's taking Keisha out, but John gets on a group text. Now, John's a great kid. He's a wonderful young man, 17 years old in your local high school or in your neighborhood. Keisha's the same age. They go to the same school. John is getting ready to go pick up Keisha, take her to the movie, but he gets on a group text with a couple of his buddies first and says, "Hey guys, I'm taking Keisha to the movie. I'll hit you guys up later," right? And they
Hmm.
give him a little crap for that. You know that, JR, right? Taking Keisha to
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
movie, all that, right? Anyway,
Uh,
John comes back from the movie, drops Keisha off. He's the perfect gentleman, and he gets back on the group text and says, "Hey, I'm back." Is the first thing those boys ask him is, "How was the movie?"
nope.
Nope, because it ain't about the movie.
Yep.
Actually, if John's spending time with Keisha, right? Because they're asking him, "Did you get anything? Did she put out?" All that kind of stuff, right? And if John says, "Well, I wasn't trying to get it. I don't even know if I want to be my friend now. I'm trying to get to know her." They got stuff to say to him that's going to
Yeah.
punish him for not trying to get something from Keisha. Now, these are 17-year-old boys. Where are they learning that from? They're learning it from the generation above them. They're learning it from the messages in media. And
Hmm.
another dare is dare to not use social media for a week, I think, or dare to go tech free. And then there's another one, dare to use social media for good. So anyway, they're getting these messages everywhere that women and girls have less value than men and boys, that women are the property of men, that girls and women are sexual objects. And that's what the book interrupts. It really teaches them to look at girls through a different lens.
Hmm.
And that dare to evaluate a song's lyrics. I mean, we as parents can't be afraid to dig in there. You know, like we're clueless. I'm 43 years old in terms. That's how the kids see me, right? Like I don't know who the hot music stars are these days. I watched SNL for like 3 weeks in a row. I was like, who? Why am I so out of the loop? When did I get so old?
The
But
music's
that's
dope, not
beside the
hot. By
point.
the way, it's dope.
Yeah, it's dope. It's dope.
I mean,
Yeah.
look, I'm gonna say all the wrong, corny, cringy stuff. It's okay. We can't be afraid to dig in. Jack's listening to a song on the radio. I think it was called Cocaine. And I was like, why don't we pull up those lyrics and see what this is about, you know? And so censorship is not an option. It's not an
Right.
option. We can't censor our children. So
Right.
we have to be able to help them become critical consumers. And we can
Yeah.
pull out the positive things in those songs. Maybe the singer overcame violence in his childhood, extreme poverty. Who knows? There's positive in there too. And then we can bring up, you know, has this singer used these lyrics to turn this girl into her body parts? Is that all that this is about? How are
Mhm.
they being objectified? What does that really mean? So let's think through that so that you don't just accept it, right? So it's not just coming in. You can make a critical decision about how it's going to affect your values and your behavior.
You know, to what both of you just said, my question then, my follow-up question is, at what age do you guys believe that it's okay to start having these conversations, right? With John that took, the girl to the movie. At what age can you start explaining to John, hey, it's okay. Like, this is this is the pressure you're going to be under, right? This is the peer pressure that you're going to be surrounded by. At what age is it okay to start talking to your son or your child, your daughter, your child, and say, hey, let's pull up the lyrics to this song real quick. And even though we're all going to be surprised here, because I'm guilty of it too. Like I hear a beat and I'm like, yep, I like this beat. I can rock with this beat, right? Oh, another thing is not dope, but fire. Oh, that's fire. Like that's fire.
That's even better.
Yes,
that's even better.
So when your son comes home, you be like, yo, was school fire today? Don't do that, okay? Like you can't just throw it on, dinner's gonna be fire. Like you can't throw it on everything, okay? So you have to be real strategic about it. I'm sure there's like how-to YouTube videos on how to use dope and fire, right? But but the point is like, I have been guilty of listening to music and enjoying the beat because it kind of makes me feel something. It makes me want to get into a certain space. But I purposely do not listen to the lyrics because I'm like, I know what it's about, right? Like I know, but at what point? Because there's not a lot of songs out there that are on the charts that are edited, right? So like when you as a parent are in the car with your child and you're listening to top 100, whatever, it's going to be hard to kind of, like all of a sudden, beep, beep, like there's a lot of stuff in there. At what age is it, do you guys believe in your experience and all the work that you've done, is it okay to start having these conversations?
As early as they're exposed to these things, whatever that is for that particular kid, but that particular family. And I know that I tried to protect my kids. They're older now, but whether it was like Call of Duty or something, or Grand Theft Auto, where I wouldn't let my kids, we wouldn't buy that for them until they were 15, 16. And then when we finally gave in at that age, right? They put it in the machine, the Xbox or whatever, and they're playing it like champs, right? Because they're hanging with their friends over their house. They've been doing it for 5 years, but in our house, right? So we really have to be able to have those conversations at any point and at all points, because we really need to expose it. And today there's so much they're exposed to, we can't protect them. You put on television now, the language on regular TV is, you'd never hear when I was younger. So the language is different. So we're having conversations all the time. And I think that's the important thing, is really to have the conversation and to not censor, as Anna Marie said. Because I remember saying there was a songs that my kids were listening to with the N-word, because they like hip hop, so do I. But the N-word was everywhere, and MF and this and that. And I was like, guys, do you really want to listen to this? Like, don't you get tired of that? They say, Dad, you watch, and I was watching The Sopranos or something at the time, right? And they weren't saying the N-word as much, but they were saying everything else. And they say the N-word too from time to time. And I was like, you're right. Or movies I might watch. So, and where the language is there. So, you're right. And I need to look at that too. So it's all over our culture, all within our culture. It's a part of our culture. But we need to be able to have these kids be media literate, where they can actually see, okay, I'm listening to this, I'm watching this, but this is what this person is saying. I'm not in favor of that, and not to get lost in the beat, as you said, JR.
Yeah, it's so good, and it's I just love what this book is about. I really do, and I'm glad that I know last year in 2020 you guys were working on it and putting it together, and then you said it was going to come out in early 21, and I remember I pre-ordered my copy, and then in early January, it arrived in my front door, and it's this beautiful cover. And so for those of you that are watching right now, here is the book right now. So The Book of Dares, let me put it right in the right frame, 100 Ways for Boys and Everybody, right? It says boys, but as we discussed in this conversation, for everybody to be kind, bold, and brave. And I believe it's something that can be useful to every family member in the house. So Anna Marie, please tell us where everyone can buy this book, where everyone can learn about A Call to Men, where everyone can listen to Ted and all of the other individuals that A Call to Men, and then decide, like you and me and so many others, I want to hold on to this.
For sure. Thank you, JR. So the Book of Dares is available at all major retailers. We encourage folks to support locally owned bookstores and Black-owned bookstores. You can go to our website, acalltomen.org, to get more information, to check out the book, to link to all those bookstores. You can do that all there. We hope that while you're there, you will check us out, sign up for our emails so that you can learn about our trainings that we offer, for parents, for corporate executives, for community members, for teachers, for educators. We've got something for everybody. Follow us on social at A Call to Men on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And if you feel moved today, by this discussion, obviously we want you to buy the book and buy one for maybe a young boy in your life that you might not be the parent of, but that you have access to in some way. And like I said, if you feel moved by this discussion and want to support the work of A Call to Men, you can do that as well. And we would be grateful for any level of support you could offer. And you can do that on our website also.
Thank you so much. One final question. And I would normally like to end on this, funny kind of, typical JR, right? But you said something right now, Anna Marie, when you were talking about where you can buy the book, and you said it's on all platforms. We would encourage you to support small businesses, Black owned. And that is something that I'm really interested about for you as a white woman, right? Like you saying that and you understanding the importance of doing that. And as we all know, in the last year, it's really been heightened, the challenges of people being able to understand and be willing to pull up a seat at the table and listen to someone else's challenge. What has that journey been like for you? And how have you gotten to this point where you just kind of just off the dome said, go support a Black-owned bookstore, and because you didn't have to say that?
No, well, I mean, you're right, JR. Our society is in a moment of great transformation, right? And for boys and for parents of boys specifically, I feel like they are being thrown terms like toxic masculinity and male privilege, and for my son, white privilege. And so we need to be able to have those conversations too. And there's a dare in the book, Dare to Understand Your Privilege, that will really help parents explain it. Just get to the heart of what privilege is in a non-threatening and non-defensive way. And that it'll allow you to be able to have a conversation with your son that empowers them to really be part of the solution. And I think for me personally, the last 18 months, it's been such an opportunity for ongoing growth, and to be able to sit with my colleagues who I genuinely love and witness the pain that they have been in has been, I mean, gosh, you're not human if you don't walk away from that and say, I need to do more, and how can I use my privilege to elevate these issues? So that's part of what it's been like for me. Thank you for asking.
Well, thank you for using your privilege, for stepping up and being an example to people in your family, people in your community, and from one Louisianan to another. That's another area we click on. But are you like a Louisiana sports fan, or are you kind of like now a Houston or Texas fan? Where are you?
Well, I mean, Louisiana's home and always will be. Texas has been good to me. But it's funny.
We grew
up watching.
It sounds like Louisiana lost you. It sounds like you belong to Houston or Texas sports now. That's what it sounds like. It's like the boys, the breakup's coming, and it's
what's happening here? No, I grew up watching the Cowboys and the Saints. Now, this is because I had a sweet little aunt. So I am from Louisiana. My family is Syrian and Lebanese. So we have growing up, we would have these huge Lebanese lunches on Sundays after church. And my sweet little aunt, whose house that I went to for all my Syrian lunches, would always have on the Cowboys. She was a Cowboys fan. So I grew up watching the Cowboys and the Saints. So I'm a good mix all the way around.
Okay. All right. I can get that. Ted, who you rock with? You in New York. Who do you rock with?
Oh, I don't really have a favorite team, I really don't. And but I love the sport. I love the game, of course, but I really don't. And with all the work that we've done with the sports leagues over the years, I just love the guys, and we found that, these are like, as much as you might hear negative things because it's louder and bigger, these are good men doing wonderful things in their community. And actually, there's less issues within these professional sports ranks than in our general population. But you wouldn't know that, because when things do happen, it's just bigger and louder. So I just love the athletes and the men, and we've had a great success with sports teams. So I really don't have a favorite at this point.
Well, it's all good, Ted. Listen, I love you guys. I love A Call to Men. I love everything that you guys have done, that you guys continue to do. And I know you guys are going to continue to do great things. And I'm just honored to be on, the bandwagon and to be able to help be one of the voices for this incredible work that you guys are doing. So again, to everybody watching or listening, I want to encourage you to go check out the Book of Dares. Go check out A Call to Men. Get behind this work. They're doing incredible things. And I think you learned a lot from Ted and Anna Marie. And they're just only two of the incredible people at this organization that has been able to keep it afloat. Here we are almost 20 years later. So thank both of you for coming on this podcast and talking to me about this book and why you decided to write it, the importance of us having this conversation, and most importantly, the willingness for every single one of us to be able to show up for one another and actively listen. Because once we do that, then we're able to have a better understanding of one another and to be able to know how we show up for one another. So thank you guys so much for this conversation. We might have to do it again.
Please. Thank you, JR. We'd love that.
Thank you, JR. We love you.
Conversation was dope. This conversation was dope. All right, Anna Marie? It was dope.
But was it fire?
Oh, it was fire too. It was all of the above. All right. Take care, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to the wonderful Anna Marie Johnson and Ted Bunch. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to share and subscribe and follow me at I am JR Martinez on Instagram and social media to learn more about these amazing guests and me. Until next time, this is Rebirth.